I still remember the box it came in. Velvet, a little torn on the edges, with a scent like old linen and rosewater. Inside was the ring. Thin. Almost fragile. A dull red stone in the center, worn just enough to feel like it had seen things I was too young to understand when I got it. It wasn't worth much to anyone else, but to me, it was my mother's warmth made tangible. She passed away 2 months after she gave it to me, and after that, I'd open the box sometimes just to remember how her voice sounded when she said, "This is yours now. Keep it close." I kept it tucked in a drawer most of the time, not out of neglect, but out of reverence. I'd worn it once or twice on birthdays, maybe anniversaries. Then I stopped. The older I got, the more I feared losing it. It became more of a symbol than a piece of jewelry. A relic of something pure that survived long after grief hardened the rest of my life. It stayed with me through my 20s, my divorce, and even when I moved into a smaller house after downsizing. I carried it like a sacred thing. Then came the favor. My sister called me frantic one morning, saying her apartment had black mold, and she had nowhere to stay. Her voice, always so high-strung, now dipped into panic. I didn't think twice. I told her she could stay at the old bungalow I owned near the beach. It had been left to me when our grandparents passed, not a grand place, but quiet, safe, and full of light. I hadn't rented it out in years. It was meant for emergencies. I guess I thought that's what this was. She moved in the next day like she'd been waiting for an excuse. Clothes exploded across the rooms, her tiny dog claimed the couch, and soon the place looked like a teenager's closet exploded across every corner. But I didn't say anything. I let her settle. I figured she'd get back on her feet and move out in a month or two. Instead, she started treating it like a vacation home. Weekend parties. Beach photos. Hashtags and mimosas. She even tagged the location once, as if it was a luxury Airbnb. But again, I stayed silent. She was my sister. We didn't have many family ties left, and despite our bickering and differences, I wanted to believe she wouldn't cross any serious line. Just inconsiderate. Not cruel. Until the day I opened my drawer. I don't even know why I checked. Maybe I just wanted to feel something real that day. Maybe some part of me already knew. But when I pulled the drawer open and saw the box empty, light, I stopped breathing. I turned the velvet over, checked under the lining, the sides. Nothing. I checked other drawers. I tore apart the entire closet. Nothing. At first, I wanted to believe it fell. Or maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. I turned the house upside down before even thinking of her. But the truth came for me quick. She'd visited a week before. Said she forgot her flat iron and needed to pick it up. I wasn't home, so I told her where the spare key was. She promised she'd be quick. "Won't even touch anything," she said. "I know how you are about your space." I remembered her saying that. I also remembered the look she gave me at dinner a few days later, nervous, distracted, overcompensating with a little too much wine and laughter. I didn't connect it at the time. But now, the signs pulsed in hindsight like neon. And then came the proof. Not even hidden. A public post. A photo on a beach in Tulum, sun high in the sky, captioned, "Had to treat myself." Sometimes you just need to let go of old baggage. She was holding a cocktail in one hand. On the other, her fingers bare, except for one thing. The ring. My ring. That was the moment I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. That was the moment something inside me stopped being soft. I didn't confront her right away. I think that's the part she'll never understand, that silence from me doesn't mean ignorance. That calm doesn't mean weakness. I knew the ring was gone before she even posted her beach selfies. It was an antique, small, delicate, worn from time but unmistakable. That faint scratch near the setting, the slightly crooked clasp on the back, the way the light caught the stone like a frozen drop of blood. That ring had my history in it. You don't forget something like that. I saw the PayPal transaction, too. Her phone buzzed on the counter while she was in the shower. I hadn't meant to look, but the screen lit up with a message that said, "Payment received, $312.50, red stone ring, vintage." My heart didn't even jump. It just dropped. Quiet and heavy, like a curtain falling at the end of a show. That amount told me everything, not just that she sold it, but that she didn't even know what it was worth. Or worse, she knew exactly what it meant to me and still priced it like a clearance sale. That same evening, she was laughing at her phone over dinner, retelling some story about flirting with a bartender on her trip. I watched her cut into her steak with my grandmother's old silverware, drink wine from the glasses I had picked out when I first furnished that beach house. She was living in my memories and treating them like decoration. When I asked how she paid for the trip, she barely blinked. "Savings," she said. "Sold a couple things I didn't need anymore. You know how it is." And then she smiled, that plastic, half-curved thing she's always used to escape consequences. The kind of smile that had gotten her out of late fees, parking tickets, failed relationships, and mom and dad's lectures for most of her life. I nodded. I smiled back. But in my mind, I was already walking through the house with new eyes. Every framed photo she'd hung, every knick-knack she'd added without asking, it all looked temporary now. Like props in a set that was about to be taken down. I had never thought of the house that way before. I had always seen it as a gift. A responsibility. Something our grandparents entrusted to me because I was careful, quiet, steady. I never bragged about it. Never used it as leverage. But she had treated it like a prize she didn't even win. And that's when I remembered something from years ago. After our grandfather passed, he left us each a letter. Mine had instructions about the property, about maintenance, about keeping it in the family. Hers had one line. "Find your own way, and take care of your sister if she ever loses hers." She laughed when she read it. She thought it meant I was supposed to bail her out forever. But I had kept the letter. Folded. Tucked in my files. Alongside it was the title deed. One name on it, mine. She had never asked. She just assumed it was hers because she needed it. I spent the next few days pulling together every receipt I could find. The purchase record from the pawn shop. A copy of her social media post. A screenshot of her PayPal sale confirmation, conveniently still in her email, which she'd once linked to my old desktop and never unlinked. She didn't even change her passwords. That's how entitled she was. How untouchable she believed herself to be. It wasn't even about the money. It wasn't even about the ring anymore. It was about the disrespect. The pattern. The way she looked at things I loved and saw them as disposable. And for once, I realized I had something she wanted, something she thought was hers, but never was. I just had to decide how to take it back. I waited until after her birthday. It wasn't generosity, it was strategy. I wanted her to have one last illusion of comfort before I pulled the curtain back. She'd thrown herself a little backyard gathering with fairy lights and cheap wine, all paid for with what she called manifested abundance. I watched her giggle through toasts and take pictures in front of the hydrangeas I had planted years ago. Not a single thank you. Not once did she acknowledge that she was living in a house she didn't pay for, furnished with things she didn't buy, surrounded by memories she had no part in preserving. After the guests left and the music stopped, I stayed behind to help her clean. She handed me a trash bag like I was staff. No hesitation. No thanks. That moment stuck in my ribs like a splinter. She had mistaken kindness for servitude. I wasn't her sister in her eyes anymore, I was just the woman who made her life easy. 2 days later, I went downtown to visit the attorney who handled my grandmother's estate. Her office was quiet, tidy, no nonsense. I asked about the legal status of the beach house, just to be sure. The answer came swiftly: the house was mine. Not co-owned, not managed, fully deeded in my name. I could sell it, rent it, bulldoze it if I wanted. My sister had no legal footing. No lease. No paperwork. Just presence. When I left the law office, I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. The air was still, and outside, the world went on like nothing had changed. But in me, something had. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. The kind of clarity that doesn't need explanation. I had always waited for someone else to tell me what I was allowed to do. This time, no one needed to grant me permission. I stopped by City Records that same afternoon and requested a printed copy of the property title. When the clerk handed it to me, my name sat there in bold, legal typeface as mine. I folded the document neatly and slipped it into a folder next to the pawnshop receipt. It felt heavier than paper. Like confirmation that this time, I wouldn't let her rewrite the story. At home, I pulled out a spiral notebook and made a list. Step by step. I wouldn't make a scene. No yelling. No tantrums. I wanted this to be methodical. Civil, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is delivered with absolute calm. The next item on my list was gathering proof, for myself more than anything. I logged into her old email again. It was all still there. An invoice from the pawnshop. A flight itinerary to Tulum, dated 3 days after the ring was sold. A message to her friend that read, "Sold that old ring from my mom's stash. Got just enough for the deposit. Manifestation, babe. Not our mom's stash. My drawer. My memory." I printed the screenshots and added them to the folder. Then I called a property management firm. I'd never planned to rent the house out. But now the idea of making money from something she had taken for granted, that felt right. I scheduled a walkthrough. The agent asked when the current tenant would be vacating. I told her, 30 days. She just doesn't know it yet. Back at my place, I stared at the folder on my desk. Proof, plan, purpose. All sitting there, waiting. For years, I'd let her mistake my silence for softness. But now, I had the leverage. She had crossed a line. And this time, I wouldn't let her just step back over it. She didn't know it yet, but she was already living on borrowed time. I didn't just want her out, I wanted her to feel it. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that made her pause. That made her remember this moment the next time she reached for something that wasn't hers. The next time she told herself that consequences were for other people. She had spent her whole life leaning on everyone else and assuming they'd bend. I had bent more times than I could count. But not this time. This time I was the wall. The property manager arrived on a Thursday morning. Professional, courteous, clipboard in hand. I told her we'd need to be discreet, that the current occupant was my sister, and she didn't know she was being asked to leave yet. The woman didn't flinch. She'd seen worse, I'm sure. She walked through the house while my sister was at her yoga class, noting the wear on the kitchen tiles, the chipped paint on the patio railing, the wine-stained rug in the guest room. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. By the time we were done, she told me I could get a decent monthly rent, more than decent, actually. Coastal property, well-maintained, quiet neighborhood. You've been sitting on a small gold mine, she said. No, I thought. I've been sitting on a memory someone else has been draining. That night, I brought over coffee. My sister was curled up on the couch in an oversized hoodie, binging a reality show. She greeted me with a half-hearted smile and barely muted annoyance, like I had interrupted her peace. I handed her the cup, sat across from her, and asked how her trip had been. She went on for 10 minutes straight, the beaches, the clubs, the boutique hotel she splurged on. I listened. Smiled when appropriate. Even laughed at her story about losing her sunglasses in the ocean. Then I asked her again, gently, so what did you sell to pay for all this? She blinked. Just once. But I caught it. Oh, just old stuff, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. Stuff I wasn't using. A few pieces of jewelry I didn't even remember I had. I sipped my coffee slowly and nodded. Not the red ring, though. The one from Mom? She hesitated. Too long. I don't even know where that went, she said eventually. Probably lost it ages ago. She couldn't even look me in the eye. I stood and gave her a hug before I left. A long one. The kind of hug people give right before they cut ties, but the other person doesn't realize it yet. She said she'd see me at the family barbecue next week. I told her we'd see. I waited 3 more days. Just enough time for the property manager to prepare the paperwork. Then I sent the notice. Certified mail, signature required. It would arrive on a Monday, always a good day to disrupt someone who thought their life was under control. Sunday night, I barely slept. Not out of guilt, but anticipation. Like something unfinished was finally moving forward. Monday morning, my phone buzzed at 10:07 a.m. A missed call. Then another. Then a text. What the hell is this? Are you evicting me? I didn't reply. At 10:23, she called again. I answered. Are you serious right now? She snapped, already crying. You're kicking me out? You can't do that. I live here. You stay there, I corrected. You never lived there. Not the way you think. You can't just throw me out over a ring. It was never just a ring, I said quietly. It was everything you always took from me. This is just the first time I'm taking something back. She sputtered, shock, rage, disbelief all fighting for space. I'm your sister. I know, I said. And I was yours. You just didn't act like it. Then I hung up. And I didn't answer when she called again. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not for her, she was loud. Voicemails, texts, even long, rambling Facebook posts about family betrayal and greed. She painted herself as the victim, the abandoned sibling tossed out by a cold-hearted sister who cared more about a trinket than blood. I read every word without reacting. She tagged me in a few. I let them sit there like stains on a white shirt, visible, but powerless. The people who mattered knew the truth. The people who didn't weren't worth correcting. She tried calling our aunt, who called me, concerned. I told her everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I just sent her the screenshots, the pawn shop receipt, the PayPal transaction, the picture of my sister on the beach with her manifested abundance. By the time I finished, our aunt let out a long sigh and said, I always hoped she'd grow up eventually. Guess this is what that looks like. The legal timeline ticked on. 30 days. That's all the notice she got. No more. No less. I didn't demand back rent. I didn't touch her things. I simply let time close the door on her behalf. She sent an email midway through the process, a last-ditch appeal, can we please talk about this face-to-face? You don't have to do this. I stared at the words for a while. They would have meant something, if they had come before the lie. Before the sale. Before the betrayal that she didn't even think I'd notice. I replied with a scanned image of the ring receipt and a single line. You did this the moment you chose a vacation over my trust. She didn't respond. Instead, she packed slowly, dragging it out until the last day. When I drove by 2 days before the deadline, her car was still there, and the living room lights were on. But on the final morning, when the property manager arrived with the locksmith, the driveway was empty. A few boxes were stacked neatly in the front room, labeled in her curling handwriting. Clothes. Books. Miscellaneous. She'd left the key on the kitchen counter in a coffee mug I'd bought during our first road trip together as teens. The handle was chipped. The side read, "Sisters are forever." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. We walked through the house. It felt hollow, but clean. She hadn't destroyed anything. She hadn't left a mess. In her own way, it was an apology. Or maybe just a white flag. Either way, it didn't matter. After the walkthrough, I signed the lease agreement with the new tenants. A retired couple from Oregon, looking to spend their winters near the water. The husband reminded me of our grandfather, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who cleaned his shoes before entering someone else's home. They moved in 2 weeks later and paid 6 months in advance. The house was finally at peace. A week after that, I received a small padded envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded note and something wrapped in tissue. The note read, "Found this in the bottom of a box. Didn't know I still had it. Sorry I lied." Inside was a tiny gold earring, part of a set I'd lost years ago. The match to the one my mother wore the day she passed. It wasn't the ring. That was gone forever. But it was something. I placed the earring in a new velvet box and tucked it away. Not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a record. A closing line. The ring had been the final straw. But this was the comma before the full stop. I visited the house one last time before the new tenants moved in. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of stillness that settles over a place after years of noise, the echo of voices that had finally left the walls. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floor, feeling the familiar groan of the boards under my weight. That sound used to comfort me. Now it just confirmed what I already knew, it was no longer mine to live in. Only mine to let go of. The air smelled like lemon polish and salt. She had cleaned before she left. Not well, not with care, but enough to pass. That alone surprised me. I half expected to find resentment scrawled into the walls, maybe passive-aggressive notes left behind, but there was none of that. Just dust, faint outlines where pictures used to hang, and a coffee mug missing its handle in the sink. I left it there. I stood in what used to be her bedroom and stared at the spot where my grandmother's quilt used to rest on the guest bed. She'd taken that too. I didn't care. Most of the things she took were replaceable, except the ring. That stayed with me like a toothache you learn to stop flinching from. But for all the things she'd taken, I had taken something too. The illusion that I was weak. The belief that I was the one who always had to bend. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't cursed or thrown anything. I had simply drawn a line and then followed it, step by step, until she was no longer standing on the wrong side of it. I changed the locks that afternoon. The locksmith was quick and didn't ask questions. He probably did this sort of thing often, for landlords, for breakups, for fresh starts. When he was done, he handed me 2 new keys. I placed one in a drawer in my kitchen. The other I handed to the property manager. "It's a beautiful house," she said as we locked the door. Feels like it's got a lot of history. I smiled faintly. It does. But it's time for it to have something else now. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No dreams. No bitterness. Just silence. In the weeks that followed, I heard rumors. That my sister was staying with a friend. That she'd tried to move back in with one of her exes and was promptly turned away. She still hadn't called. I didn't expect her to. I think deep down, she knew she had gone too far. Not because of the ring's value. But because she gambled that I wouldn't do anything, and she lost. I never told her what I did with the rent money from the new tenants. But part of it, I used to restore a tiny glass display case in my own home. I filled it with a few small things, that single earring she returned, my mother's broken watch, a photo of us as children, both smiling, neither aware of the lines we'd eventually cross. I kept it not as a shrine, but as a boundary. A quiet reminder of what I'd protected. I used to believe that holding on to people, no matter how much they hurt you, was a sign of strength. That forgiving and enduring meant you were the better person. But now I know better. Sometimes strength is the silence that follows a locked door. Sometimes love means walking away, even when you remember who they used to be. And sometimes, the loudest forgiveness is simply choosing not to invite them back.